We'll be talking about the Calculate Wells and Zone feature in GWAS GeoPlus. This is a fairly new feature which was introduced in Geographix version 2022.1. And the main idea behind this tool is to provide a streamlined workflow for running calculations on your well data. So this tool, it saves your time by simplifying the whole process of querying well data in specified zones and then running calculations on that. So in today's webinar, we will be talking about how to calculate wells in zone and what are the different ways to specify your zones of interest within this feature. You can use zones that you have already created in Zone Manager, but at the same time, you can also use certain surfaces to specify zones. You can use multiple zones from Zone Manager. You can use thickness maps, IsoMaps, existing Geobodies. So we'll talk about all of that and how can we incorporate these to specify your zones of interest within Geoverse GeoPlus. We'll also be talking about how this tool allows you to specify different data types for well calculation, in turn allowing you to take control of the data types that go into that calculation. This feature is not just limited to only allowing you to query data in Zone and running calculations on that, but it also allows you to save that data, the calculations that you've made. You can save that to the Geographix database. You can export well projection data, and then we'll also talk about how you can generate survey point reports using this tool. So let's go ahead, let's get started. Okay, so we have switched over to the GWAS GeoPlus interpretation. We're going to go ahead and launch the tool from here. One of the direct ways to launch the Calculate Wells and Zone tool would be to go to the Tools tab right here and click on the Calculate Wells and Zone button. It's going to the Calculate Weldon Zone dialog box will appear, and over here you can say that you have three major sections in this dialog box. We have the zone selection section, we have the calculate options box, and we have the well selection box. We're going to go ahead and start with well selection first. So there are a couple of ways in which you can select or in which you can tell the program which wells to run the calculation on. And again, just like the rest of the tool, this is very flexible. So one way that you can do this is you can click on add here and you can select your wells. So you can click your mouse button and drag the cursor down to select as many wells as you'd like. If you want, you can select a few wells too. So keep the control key pressed and you can select the wells that you'd want to include in your interpretation. Once you're good, you can click OK there. That is one way to add wells to your interpretation. Another way to add wells to your interpretation and launch the tool at the same time would be simply to select the wells from your map in 2D view. So drag your cursor across the screen to select your wells, right click and select the calculate wells and zone option. So this time your tool will launch with the wells already selected, like you can see here. We'll close out and look into one more way that you can select wells and launch the tool. So we can launch any cross section here. Let's say I'd like to send my cross section wells to the let's say I want to run the zone calculations on my cross section wells. So all I have to do then is right click on the cross section and select the calculate all wells and zone option. Now this time when I send the well, I see I've got my well selection already in place here. So these are some of the ways in which we can go ahead and select the wells. I'm going to close out and move back to our original dialog box, accessing it from here. Okay, so the wells that I am selecting here are, I'm going to select some specific wells that I'd like to run the calculation on. And okay, and click OK there. We've got the wells in there. Now, zone selection. This feature, it allows you, again, great control over selecting and specifying what zones do you want to run the calculations in. It allows you to tailor your zone parameters with great precision. So some of the things that you can do. Let's say you already have an existing zone manager zone. So you can click here and your zone manager zones will appear on the left. We're going to start all the way from the top and look at these one by one. How can you add and specify zones using different options here? So the first one is IsoMap. Okay, so this IsoMap option is only going to list the isomaps that exist in the interpretation. It's basically the isomaps that have been added to your from Geoatlas to your data panel 2D. Those are the only maps that are going to be shown here. So you can choose an isomap for to act as a top and base for your zone. And once you're happy with that, you can go ahead. So you've got a drop down list here. You can select any map to act as a top and base. And once you're happy with that, you can click on the add zone button right here and the zone will be added on the left. Now, the good part about this zone selection box is that it lets you run the calculation on multiple zones. So I can go ahead and keep on adding several zones that are defined by isomap layers, and these zones will be included in the calculation. We'll look into this further as we move on. The next option here are if you have any available geobodies and you'd like to run calculations within that zone, you can do that too. So I've got two major geobodies here. If I want, as I was talking earlier, I can use this area here to select which of the geobodies do I want in my calculation. So if I select one, only this one will be added. I'd like both of them to be in there, so you can select both of them and they'll be added to your calculation. Another option here is also thickness maps. The thickness maps, these are the maps that were generated within GeoVerse GeoPlus using your GeoModel. So you can use your existing thickness maps, again, one, more than one, to run the calculations on as well. The top and base for your thickness maps, of course, are already defined when you were creating the maps in the GeoModel, so you don't have to do that right now. Then we come to the classic zone manager zones. So again, only the zones that are part of the GeoModel will be listed here. Now, how would a zone become a part of your GeoModel? The idea is that the surfaces that you have added to your GeoModel, if those surfaces correspond to the top and base that is defined for that zone, you'll have that zone listed here. Otherwise not. So I've got two zones in my model here. I can select both of them and run the calculations on these. If you feel that you do not have an existing ISOMAP or a geobody or any thickness map or anything really that you'd like that would define the zone that you're looking forward to running the calculations on, you can go ahead and select the Surfaces tab here and choose your top surface and the base surface and assign your zone like that. Once you're good, once you're happy with that, you can again click on the Add Zone button right here. I've already done that. You can see the surface over here. It shows the top and base as the one that we've defined. So, so we're gonna go ahead and stick with the thickness maps for this calculation today. And this is the surface that I will be using. So the next big step after we've made our zone selection would be setting up the calculation options. I've got a couple of options here. Once you have selected the zone, you can also state whether you would like your zone calculations to start with the start of the zone or assign a different value. You can start your calculations based on the top surface and the zone that is defined, a specific angle, or measured depth. But MD option is only available for single well selection. Alright, next we have the data types for calculations. So for this option here, what we are what we're doing really is we're choosing whether the length and percent calculation along the wellbore is defined on the basis of certain data types. And we can choose these data types, for example, well length right here. We can choose this checkbox to calculate the well length within this zone or the zones if we've chosen more than one. And we've got the DST option here and core preparation. So really what we're doing is we can check any of these boxes if we want to add them to our calculations. For example, for perforation, we can use this checkbox to calculate the length of well perforations within a defined zone. We can calculate the well completions within that zone, or we can go ahead and calculate the IP within our defined zone. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with the selection that I've made here. I'd want well length, the core data, and perforation. We can add completion in there too. I would want all of these to be added to my calculation. Next step, I'm going to go ahead and select those wells again. Okay, once you're happy, you can click OK there. I've got my wells in. You also have an option to save this entire setting as a template that you can later access. So as we see, this tool, it focuses a lot on ease of access for the users. You have lots of options and control over the data that goes into your calculation, over the zone that and how it is defined. And now for future reference, you can save all these settings as a CWZ file, which can later be accessed. So next time when you launch the feature, when you launch this tool, all you have to do is go to load template button right here, and all of your settings will be loaded in place for the next calculation. You can just go ahead and save this and test. All right, next we can go ahead and click on the calculate button right there. Okay, so our calculate wells and zone report would appear on your screen. You can view the report, go through it, and it will show you the data that will be present for those wells and the calculations associated with them. There are a couple of things that you can do here. You can proceed, go ahead and save this data to Zone Manager, Geographix database. Again, choosing the zone here. I'll save this to the Barnet target surface. Once you have your data saved to Zone Manager, you can go ahead and view it in Zone Manager and use it as you'd like in your interpretation. So I'm going to click OK here, close out of it, and switch to Zone Manager. So yeah, okay. Over here I have a simple all attribute spreadsheet for the Barnet target surface with the 3 wells that I ran the calculations on. And I can see that in my spreadsheet over here. Now, if you'd like, you can also go ahead and copy the well projection data right from within this dialog box back in Geobrace Geomodeling. So over here, there is this option for copy to clipboard. The best thing about it is that you don't have to go ahead and improvise with the options that are just available to you by default. You can tailor the format of how you'd like to copy this data to your clipboard. So this tool, it provides you three options to copy the data. You can copy it in a tab delimited format, in a space delimited format, or a comma delimited format. Let's try copying the data in comma delimited format. So we go ahead, we choose the right option and click the copy to clipboard button. Next step, we open Notepad and we can simply copy the data in there. If you'd like, you can again go ahead, choose another format. Let's say we want space delimited this time. We copy the clipboard and we paste the data in there. It's that easy. However, you can also choose to directly save this data as a file using the Save as Text option. So again, you can choose your options from here and use the Save as Text option to go ahead and save your data in the format that's the most compatible for you. Okay, next up, you can go ahead and generate your survey point report if you like. So your survey point report would contain your well ID number, well MD, zone top, zone base, along with other details. It's going to open up in a new window. And again, with this report, you can go ahead and copy it to your clipboard, or you can save it as text in the 3 available formats. And this concludes our webinar. We talked about what are the different ways in which you can take control over the way that you define your zone for calculation. You looked into how you can control the data types that go into your calculation and how you can select the wells. What are the different ways to select the wells that are going to be a part of your calculation. We looked into different ways to export well projection data using this tool. And finally, we looked into how you can save that data to Zone Manager and generate a well survey point report and how to export it. So that's it. That's the wells and zone, calculate wells and zone feature. I hope that this would be helpful for a lot of users. The webinar itself and this feature would make the workflows that much more easier for everyone. Thank you for joining us today.